The sky over the Xylar capital shimmered with shades of violet and gold, the colors of the twin suns reflecting on the vast spires of crystal and metal. From above, the city looked like a jewel, sparkling yet alive, each tower humming with energy as if the entire civilization itself were breathing. Captain Cale Roran gazed down from the shuttle window, feeling the weight of the mission pressing on his shoulders. He had traveled farther than any human had ever gone in a diplomatic role, and though he was trained for survival and strategy, nothing could have prepared him for this moment. Beside him, Lieutenant Mara, his aide, adjusted her harness and glanced at him with a mix of excitement and worry. "It's beautiful," she said softly, almost afraid to break the silence. "But don't let it fool you. This planet is full of rules and traditions. One mistake and—" She trailed off, knowing the consequences without saying them. Cale nodded, though his mind was already scanning the city below. He had read about the Xylar for years, tall, elegant, with skin that seemed to shimmer in certain lights, eyes that could pierce through a lie, and a culture rigidly bound by hierarchy and honor. The political marriage he had been sent for was meant to secure peace between the Xylar and a rival faction that had been threatening the border worlds for decades. It was a ceremonial arrangement, meant to show unity and obedience, yet somehow he sensed that this alliance could mean much more than anyone realized. The shuttle landed in the royal docking bay, a structure so immense it could hold dozens of ships the size of his own. As the doors opened, Cale stepped out onto a polished platform that gleamed like glass. He was immediately struck by the air, not just the oxygen, but the hum of energy and authority that seemed to seep into every corner. Xylar guards, clad in armor that reflected the light like liquid metal, lined the passage. They did not speak, but their eyes followed every step he took. "Stay calm," Mara whispered. "Remember, they notice everything, every movement, every hesitation." "Then I'll just have to make my hesitation deliberate." He could sense the weight of generations, the expectation that anyone in his place must not only survive but contribute meaningfully to their society. Finally, they reached the throne chamber. The doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing a vast hall where the air seemed thick with anticipation. The throne itself was raised on a platform of carved crystal, and seated upon it was Queen Saria, ruler of the Xylar, radiating authority. Her presence alone made the room feel alive, as though every being present had been drawn to a single point. Cale straightened instinctively aware of the centuries of tradition and power that she represented. Beside her stood Princess Lyra, the intended partner in this political union. Cale had seen her images in reports, tall, graceful, with eyes that held both curiosity and a faint edge of defiance. But now, seeing her in person, he realized that nothing could have prepared him for the effect of her presence. She moved with a confidence born of both duty and natural command. There was no arrogance in her stance, yet she demanded attention without asking for it. The Queen's voice cut through the silence, melodic but sharp, carrying the authority of someone who had never needed to raise her tone to command respect. "Captain Cale Roran," she said, her gaze unwavering, "you have traveled far to honor the agreement between our peoples. Your presence here will be remembered. You understand the importance of this union. You will be expected to learn our ways and to respect them. You will also learn the customs of marriage within Xylar society. You must understand that this union is more than symbolic. It represents the trust and future of our people." He had prepared for ceremony, for politeness, for diplomacy, but the implication that he might influence or even steer the destiny of an entire civilization was staggering. "I will do my utmost to honor your expectations, Your Majesty," he said firmly. Princess Lyra's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, Cale saw a spark of something he could not name, curiosity, perhaps, or the faintest hint of amusement. Lyra inclined her head slightly, acknowledging him without a word. It was enough to make Cale aware that their relationship would not be simple, and that every action, every word could carry weight beyond immediate understanding. Over the next several hours, Cale was guided through the formalities of Xylar life. He met advisors, generals, and scholars, each interaction a careful dance of observation and protocol. At every turn, Cale noted the subtle ways in which the Xylar communicated, how they valued precision, discipline, and insight. His human instincts often guided him differently, favoring flexibility over strict adherence, improvisation over rigid planning. He quickly realized that these differences would be both his challenge and, potentially, his advantage. During a private dinner with Princess Lyra, Kale finally had a moment to speak candidly. The table was set with crystalline vessels that held food unfamiliar to his senses, each bite a burst of flavor that seemed almost magical in its intensity. Lyra watched him carefully, her expression unreadable. "You adapt quickly," she said finally, breaking the silence. "Most humans would be overwhelmed by the customs and rules, yet you do not seem burdened. I've learned that survival often depends on observing first and reacting second. Rules are important, but understanding them is more important. Perhaps the two are not so different." Kale felt a strange sense of camaraderie forming, a connection not born of friendship but of mutual understanding. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, if only because the fates of their peoples were intertwined. That night, as Kale retired to the quarters assigned to him within the palace, he reflected on what he had seen and heard. The Xylar were magnificent, their civilization advanced and beautiful beyond anything he had imagined. Yet their rigidity and strict adherence to tradition left them vulnerable in ways they might not yet understand. And as he lay awake, staring at the crystalline ceiling that mirrored the twin suns above, Kale realized that the political marriage he had been sent to honor might become something far greater. Somewhere deep within him, a spark of ambition flickered. Not for power, not for glory, but for the opportunity to prove that a human could not only survive among the stars, but thrive in ways that even the most advanced civilizations had not yet imagined. Little did Kale know, the first tests of that resolve were already approaching. The rival faction that threatened the Xylar borders was not idle, and soon, the ceremonial role he had expected to play would be replaced by one that demanded courage, strategy, and perhaps something more. The kind of human ingenuity that could turn the tide of war and alter the fate of an entire world. As the night deepened and the palace settled into quiet, Kale stared out at the glowing horizon, feeling both anticipation and a strange sense of calm. He did not yet know what trials awaited him, nor how his actions might ripple across the galaxy. But one truth was certain: he would not shrink from the challenge. The path of duty might have brought him here, but the path of destiny would be carved by his own hands. And somewhere in the shadows of the palace, Princess Lyra watched him as well, a silent observer who understood that the human before her was unlike any she had ever known. Their journey had only just begun, and already the balance of tradition, duty, and the unknown future trembled on the edge of a blade. The morning light filtered through the translucent walls of the palace, painting the corridors in soft shades of violet and gold. Kale awoke with a sense of purpose, the memories of his first day still vivid in his mind. The palace, with its immense spires and crystalline halls, had felt alive with the weight of tradition, and he knew that adapting to life here would take more than courtesy, it would take understanding. He dressed in the formal attire provided by the Xylar, a robe that shimmered faintly in the sunlight and marked him as the human envoy. It was ornate and heavy, but Kale appreciated the symbolism. Every thread and clasp represented centuries of history, and wearing it reminded him that he was more than a visitor. He was part of an arrangement that could determine the future of an entire civilization. At breakfast, he met Princess Lyra again in the sunlit dining hall. Unlike the evening before, there was a casual tension in the air, a mix of curiosity and subtle challenge. Lyra observed him closely as he sampled the foods laid before him, some of which defied any categorization he had encountered in his travels. They were delicate, strange, and intensely flavorful, each bite an exercise in both caution and enjoyment. "You adjust quickly," Lyra remarked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. "You did not flinch at the textures nor at the unfamiliar tastes. Most humans would have struggled. You act when others hesitate." The advisor bowed deeply, and Queen Seria's eyes narrowed, her posture stiffening. Kale followed the others into a council chamber, a vast room lined with holographic maps and projection devices that displayed the Xylar territories and nearby regions. General Tavar, the commander of the Xylar military, stood at the center, gesturing toward points on the map. His voice carried authority, though it was laced with concern. "Scout reports confirm movement near the southern border," Tavar said, his tone grave. "A fleet of the Vorak approaches. Estimates suggest they will arrive within 7 cycles. They are faster than anticipated, more organized. We must prepare for conflict immediately." Kale recognized immediately that the Xylar's conventional strategies, though effective in the past, relied heavily on rigid formations and predictable maneuvers. Against the Vorak, such predictability would be catastrophic. "Your Majesty," Kale said carefully, stepping forward, "may I suggest an alternative approach?" All eyes turned to him, curiosity mingled with suspicion. A human-speaking strategy in a Xylar council was unprecedented. Kale continued, "Rather than relying solely on static defenses and strict formations, we can employ smaller, mobile units to intercept their fleets at key points. Their ships are powerful, but they are less flexible. We can use speed, deception, and targeted strikes to slow their advance and force them into unfavorable positions. It is a different approach, but it could save lives and give us the advantage. And I understand that hesitation can be just as deadly as miscalculation." The council debated long into the morning. Some argued that Kale's human perspective might be too unpredictable for a disciplined army like the Xylars. Others, more progressive in thought, saw merit in his proposals. In the end, Queen Saria made the decision herself. "Captain Kale Roran," she said, her voice steady and commanding, "you will work with General Tavar to prepare our forces. Your suggestions will be considered, though the final decisions remain with our commanders. Your role is advisory, but it carries great responsibility. The future of our people depends on your insight as much as on your loyalty." Kale accompanied scouts to the borders, observing terrain, weather, and enemy movement. He studied Xylar soldiers, learning their strengths, weaknesses, and patterns of behavior. His suggestions, though sometimes met with skepticism, slowly began to take hold. Minor adjustments to formations, supply routes, and patrol patterns led to small but significant improvements in efficiency and readiness. Princess Lyra accompanied him on several excursions, ostensibly to observe, but Kale soon realized she was quietly evaluating him. She watched how he handled pressure, how he treated the soldiers, how he balanced caution with decisive action. At first, her observations were detached, critical even. But gradually, she began to see the value in his unconventional methods, the kind of insight that could tip the scales in a battle that was likely to determine the fate of her planet. One afternoon, as they walked along a ridge overlooking a strategic valley, Kale pointed to a series of narrow passes. "The Vorak will likely try to bypass our main defenses by moving through these paths," he said. "They will expect resistance at the conventional points. If we position small, mobile units here, we can delay them and force their main forces into a bottleneck where they are vulnerable. The Vorak will not anticipate the adaptability of units that can appear and disappear. They rely on overwhelming force and rigid planning. We can exploit that. I do not claim to be infallible, but observation and adaptability have saved my life more than once." The palace erupted into controlled chaos as soldiers were deployed, defensive positions reinforced, and communication lines strengthened. Kale worked alongside the Xylar generals, offering real-time guidance, his human perspective introducing strategies they had never considered. For the first time, Kale felt a shift in the perception of him among the Xylar military. What had begun as polite skepticism was transforming into cautious respect. Soldiers who had initially doubted the advice of an outsider now observed his decisions carefully, recognizing the precision and clarity in his thinking. Late that evening, Kale found a quiet moment in the observation deck overlooking the city. The twin suns had set, leaving the sky awash with stars that seemed impossibly close, their light reflecting off the palace towers. Lyra appeared beside him silently, her presence both comforting and commanding. "You are unlike any human I expected," she said softly. "You see possibilities where others see only limits. You act where others hesitate. I cannot say whether that is wisdom or luck, but it is impressive. Perhaps more than I expected." The Vorak were closer than even the scouts had reported. The first real test of his strategies was approaching, and the decisions he would make in the coming days could determine not only the outcome of a battle but the fate of an entire civilization. He straightened, resolve hardening in his chest. "We will be ready," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "We have to be." He did not yet know how the battle would unfold, but he knew one thing with certainty: he would not hesitate. As the night deepened and the palace settled into a tense quiet, Kale remained at the observation deck, staring into the horizon where the faint glimmer of approaching ships hinted at the coming storm. The human envoy had arrived for ceremony and diplomacy, but he was beginning to realize that his role would demand far more. He would be tested, not in protocol or etiquette, but in strategy, courage, and the very essence of what it meant to survive and protect. And somewhere in the palace, Princess Lyra watched as well, silently acknowledging that the human before her might be more than an envoy. He might become a force that could change the course of history itself. The first day of preparation had ended, but the real challenge was only beginning. The first light of the day brought little comfort to the Xylar capital. Though the city sparkled beneath twin suns, the distant horizon held a dark shimmer, the telltale signs of the approaching Vorak fleet. Captain Cale Roran stood at the palace observation deck, his eyes fixed on the tiny glimmers that indicated enemy movement. Every instinct honed over years of training told him that the coming hours would define not just the future of the Xylar, but the fate of countless lives across the neighboring systems. Princess Lyra joined him silently, her posture rigid but attentive. Unlike the morning before, she now carried a quiet tension, a respect mingled with concern. "They move faster than our scouts predicted," she said, her voice calm but edged with worry. "I fear our preparations may not be enough. Unpredictability is dangerous. Our soldiers are trained for structure and order. Chaos could destroy morale." It was unlike anything she had seen before, a calm in the storm that seemed almost unnatural. Slowly, she nodded. "Very well, show me how you intend to do it." Small mobile units would patrol the narrow passes he had identified, luring the enemy into ambushes. Artillery and defensive ships would not remain in static positions, but would shift rapidly based on enemy movements. Supply lines would be concealed, and routes adjusted hourly to prevent interception. The generals, initially skeptical, listened as Cale explained the logic behind each maneuver. His reasoning was precise, his observations keen, and slowly the room began to hum with cautious optimism. The Vorak had expected predictable defenses. Cale was designing a battlefield that would be anything but predictable. By midday, the preparations were underway. Cale accompanied the troops as they took their positions along the ridges and valleys outside the city. He moved among the soldiers, offering guidance, reassurance, and encouragement. Unlike many commanders, he did not merely issue orders from a safe distance. He walked with them, observing terrain, checking positions, and adjusting strategies in real time. His human approach, seeing opportunities where others saw obstacles, began to earn him respect. Soldiers whispered to each other, calling him the unseen advantage, a figure who seemed to anticipate the enemy before they acted. Lyra accompanied him on several rounds, silent most of the time, her eyes absorbing every detail. She noted how Cale treated each soldier with respect, how he valued observation over assumption, and how he remained calm even when unforeseen problems arose. It was clear to her that his presence was changing the morale of the troops. They trusted him in ways they rarely trusted outsiders, even their own officers. The first engagement came sooner than expected. Vorak scouts, small but heavily armed, appeared at the edge of the valley, moving in formations designed to probe defenses. Cale observed them through a binocular device, noting the timing, formation, and weaknesses. He turned to the Xylar units. "Hold your fire until the lead ship reaches the narrow pass," he instructed. "When it enters, deploy the ambush units from both sides. Do not fire prematurely. Let them think the path is clear." When Cale gave the signal, the ambush struck. Blasts erupted from concealed positions, striking with precision. The Vorak ships faltered, their formation disrupted, confusion spreading among their ranks. The valley became a controlled chaos, the Xylar moving swiftly, striking and retreating before the enemy could adapt. Cale moved along the flanks, observing every action. He adjusted positions, redirected fire, and ensured that supply units remained protected. The Vorak were experienced warriors, but Cale's unorthodox tactics caught them off guard. By the time the skirmish ended, the enemy had suffered significant losses and was forced to retreat. Xylar soldiers cheered quietly, their confidence growing with each successful maneuver. Princess Lyra watched from a ridge nearby, her eyes wide with astonishment. "They listen to you as if you were born in this army," she said softly. "And yet, you are human. How can you command respect so easily? Every decision has reasoning behind it, every action has purpose. They respond to that more than titles or uniforms." By evening, word had spread through the ranks. The envoy was no longer just a diplomat, he was a strategist, a force to be reckoned with. That night, the council convened again. Cale presented his analysis of the engagement, detailing what worked, what needed improvement, and predictions for the Vorak's next movements. The generals listened intently, no longer questioning his insights but incorporating them into their planning. Even Queen Saria, who had observed quietly, nodded with approval. "You have exceeded expectations," she said. "Your foresight and understanding of warfare are remarkable. I would have thought it impossible for a human to match the skill of a seasoned Xylar commander. Yet here you stand." The admiration she felt was tempered by the realization that Kale's presence had already begun to change the culture of her people's military. Discipline remained, but flexibility, adaptability, and initiative, qualities Kale brought naturally, were becoming valued in ways they had never been before. Over the next cycles, the Vorak continued their advance, testing the defenses of the Xylar at various points. Each engagement reinforced Kale's reputation. His strategies, while unconventional, proved consistently effective. He anticipated enemy movements, leveraged terrain, and coordinated attacks with precision. Soldiers began to see him as more than an advisor. They whispered about the god of war among humans, a figure who seemed to embody both intellect and courage in equal measure. Kale remained grounded, focusing on the mission rather than the rumors. He knew that victory depended not on legend, but on preparation, observation, and decisive action. Every skirmish was a learning opportunity, every retreat or advance a lesson to refine strategy. He guided the Xylar units with patience and clarity, earning trust and loyalty without demanding it. Princess Lyra, witnessing these victories firsthand, began to feel a shift within herself. She had expected a human envoy to be polite, clever, perhaps slightly useful in negotiation. What she found instead was someone who could match her own discipline, challenge her assumptions, and inspire those around him. She could not deny that admiration was growing alongside respect, though she kept her emotions carefully guarded. One evening, after another successful defense, Kale and Lyra stood atop the palace walls, overlooking the valley where battle had been fought. The sun dipped low, casting a warm glow over the terrain. Soldiers moved among the camps, setting defenses, tending to the wounded, and preparing for the next encounter. "You change the way they think," Lyra said softly, her gaze on Kale. "Not just in battle, but in how they see themselves. They will not forget this. They already see what is possible. It is not about me. It is about showing them that adaptation and courage are stronger than fear and routine. If they believe, they can accomplish more than they ever imagined." It has altered Hope. But he also knew that the first steps had been taken. His strategies had worked, his insight had proven valuable, and the Xylar had begun to see him not merely as a human envoy, but as a leader, a strategist, and perhaps even something greater. Somewhere in the shadows of the palace, Lyra watched him as well, silently acknowledging that the human beside her might be more than an ally. He might be a force that could change the destiny of her people, and perhaps the entire region. The first true test of war had been faced, and Kale had emerged not only unscathed, but respected, feared in a quiet way, and recognized for the brilliance that humans could bring to a galaxy that often underestimated them. The legend of the god of war was only beginning. The days that followed the first engagement passed in a blur of preparation, training, and strategy. The palace, usually a place of quiet diplomacy, now thrummed with activity. Kale moved constantly between the council chambers, the armories, and the training grounds, guiding the soldiers, observing their drills, and refining his strategies. Each day brought new challenges: logistics, supply lines, troop morale, and the constant threat of Vorak scouts, but Kale faced them all with steady determination. Princess Lyra remained close, observing and learning from him. She had seen his brilliance in battle, but she was now discovering the deeper qualities that made him remarkable. He did not lead by fear, nor by ego, but by example. He listened to the soldiers, considered their suggestions, and adapted his plans in real time. He treated their concerns seriously, acknowledging the humanity in each of them, and in doing so, he inspired loyalty that no command alone could achieve. One afternoon, Kale stood at the center of the training grounds, watching a unit of Xylar soldiers practice maneuvers he had devised. Their movements were precise, but he noticed small errors: hesitation, a misjudged step, a delayed signal. He called them together, his voice calm but authoritative. "You are doing well," he said, "but efficiency is not enough. You must anticipate the enemy, think like them, understand their intentions before they act. Every delay, every hesitation costs lives." Slowly, their movements improved, reflecting not only his guidance but the confidence he instilled in them. Princess Lyra watched silently, impressed. "You are changing them," she said softly. Not just their tactics, but the way they think. They trust you. You cannot demand it, but once it exists, it can accomplish more than orders ever could. Kale noted each pattern, each error, and began adjusting the Xylar defenses accordingly. His mind worked like a machine, processing information, predicting outcomes, and devising contingencies. In the council chamber, Queen Saria, General Tavar, and the other advisors gathered to hear his recommendations. Kale presented a plan that would spread the Xylar forces across multiple fronts, creating flexibility while maintaining strong defensive positions. Small units would operate independently, harassing the enemy and gathering intelligence, while larger formations remained ready to respond to major attacks. "This is risky," General Tavar said, concern in his voice. "Dividing our forces could leave us vulnerable to concentrated attacks. Your human perspective continues to impress. Proceed as you see fit, but remember, the lives of our people depend on every decision you make." Soldiers practiced responding to unexpected scenarios, reacting to ambushes, and coordinating movements without direct orders. The difference was noticeable. Units moved with confidence, thinking ahead, and working as cohesive teams rather than mere extensions of command. Lyra participated in some sessions, observing the interactions and noting Kale's methods. She saw how the soldiers began to trust not just his instructions, but themselves. "You are teaching them to think," she said one evening as they watched the sun set over the training grounds, "not just to follow orders. I do not want them to rely solely on me. I want them to trust themselves and each other." As the enemy approached, Kale directed small units to engage in hit-and-run tactics, drawing the Vorak into traps he had set. The results were immediate and decisive. The raiders suffered losses far greater than anticipated, and their retreat was chaotic. Soldiers whispered among themselves about the human who could predict the enemy's moves, who seemed to anticipate attacks before they happened. The legend of Kale, the human strategist, grew with every success. Yet Kale remained focused, aware that these were minor victories compared to the larger confrontation looming on the horizon. As the weeks passed, Kale's influence expanded. He met with scouts, engineers, and supply officers, ensuring that every detail of the defense was optimized. He worked alongside the generals, refining tactics and introducing innovations that combined Xylar discipline with human flexibility. Each success bolstered morale, and the soldiers began to believe that victory was possible, even against a superior enemy. One evening, after another day of intense preparation, Lyra approached Kale privately. "They speak of you as a god of war," she said softly, her voice a mixture of awe and concern. "Do you understand what that means for you?" "My focus remains on preparation, not praise. Hope can carry a soldier through despair in ways tactics cannot." They began to see him not only as a guide, but as a symbol of human ingenuity and courage, a reminder that even an outsider could change the course of war. Lyra continued to watch him closely, recognizing that the human before her was extraordinary in ways that transcended skill. He inspired confidence, thought critically under pressure, and led with both intelligence and empathy. She could not deny the admiration she felt, though she kept her emotions guarded. Then, one night, intelligence reports arrived that the Vorak had concentrated a large portion of their fleet near the northern passes, preparing for a major assault. Kale gathered the generals, the queen, and Lyra in the council chamber to discuss the plan. His eyes scanned the projections, noting enemy strength, formation, and probable movements. "We will use what we have learned," he said, his voice steady. "The northern pass is their target because they assume we will defend conventionally. We will exploit that assumption. Small units will harass the flanks and supply lines. Artillery will remain mobile, striking from unexpected positions. And the main forces will hold a strong but flexible line, ready to adapt to any move they make. We will anticipate their mistakes, and we will use them. We must remain calm, decisive, and adaptable." Kale worked tirelessly, monitoring every detail and making adjustments as new information arrived. He rarely slept, moving constantly between observation posts, training grounds, and command centers, ensuring that every unit was prepared for the battle to come. When the Vorak fleet finally appeared on the horizon, massive and menacing, the Xylar forces were ready. Kale surveyed the battlefield, noting every movement, predicting enemy responses, and directing his troops with precision. The engagement that followed would test every lesson, every strategy, and every ounce of courage they possessed. And Kale knew that whatever happened next, the legend of the human strategist, the one who had risen above expectation, who had transformed soldiers into thinkers and fighters, would be cemented in the memory of the Xyler forever. The stage was set. The god of war among humans was ready to lead, and the fate of a civilization rested in his hands. The morning sun rose over the Xyler capital, casting a warm glow over the crystalline towers and polished streets. The twin suns shimmered in perfect harmony, a rare moment of calm before the storm. Captain Kale Roran stood at the edge of the main observation deck, scanning the horizon where the Vorak fleet loomed. The air was thick with tension, but Kale felt an odd sense of clarity. Every preparation, every strategy, and every training exercise had led to this moment. Princess Lyra joined him silently, her eyes fixed on the distant shapes of the enemy ships. She had grown accustomed to the quiet strength Kale radiated, but the sight of the Vorak fleet stirred a deep unease in her. "They are larger than I imagined," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fear she did not allow herself to show. Kale nodded. "Numbers alone do not determine the outcome. We have knowledge, preparation, and the advantage of adaptability. That is where we will prevail." Artillery and defensive forces moved fluidly, prepared to respond to enemy maneuvers. Supply lines were hidden and protected, with contingencies in place for every possibility. Kale had thought of everything, or so he hoped. The first signs of attack came as the Vorak scouts attempted to probe the northern pass. Kale had anticipated this and had stationed small units along hidden ridges. As the scouts advanced, the ambush was executed perfectly. Blasts erupted from concealed positions, striking with precision. The Vorak formation faltered, and Kale's units struck quickly, retreating before the enemy could recover. The effectiveness of the tactics sent a ripple of confidence through the Xyler soldiers. From the observation deck, Lyra watched silently, awe mingled with tension. "They move with coordination unlike anything I've seen," she said softly. "It is as if the battlefield itself responds to him." As the main Vorak fleet approached, Kale's mind worked with calculated precision. He directed smaller units to harass the enemy flanks, forcing them into positions that would expose vulnerabilities. Artillery units shifted continuously, striking from unexpected angles. Each movement was calculated, timed to perfection, and executed with the discipline Kale had instilled in the Xyler forces. The first major engagement erupted in the northern valley. Vorak ships descended in waves, their weapons blazing. Kale's strategies forced them into bottlenecks where the terrain amplified the effectiveness of Xyler defenses. The soldiers moved with confidence, striking with precision and retreating before the enemy could respond. Kale directed the battle from a vantage point, adjusting strategies in real time. Princess Lyra observed, unable to tear her eyes away. She had seen battles before, but never with such clarity, such understanding. Kale anticipated every move, countered every attack, and inspired the soldiers to fight beyond their limits. The legend of the human strategist, whispered among the troops for weeks, now became reality. Hours passed in a relentless clash of fire and strategy. The Vorak were relentless, pushing harder as the day progressed, but each advance was met with cunning tactics, rapid adaptation, and decisive strikes. Kale's presence was everywhere, on the front lines through the soldiers' actions, in the coordination of mobile units, and in the precise timing of counterattacks. By late afternoon, the Vorak commander realized the tide was turning. The enemy forces were fatigued, scattered, and demoralized. Kale had transformed the battlefield into a chessboard, anticipating every move and forcing mistakes that cost lives and momentum. Finally, the Vorak retreated in disorder, their fleet limping back toward the stars, leaving behind the wounded and the defeated. The Xyler soldiers erupted in quiet cheers. They were victorious, though exhausted. They had survived, and they had done so with the ingenuity, courage, and guidance of a human who had risen above expectation. Kale allowed himself a moment to breathe, his eyes scanning the battlefield one last time to ensure the enemy would not return immediately. Princess Lyra approached, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, slowly, a smile broke across her face. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved them all. You were the one who saw what they could not, who turned fear into action. You are more than guidance, Kale. You are a symbol." Injured soldiers were tended to, supply lines restored, and defenses reinforced. Kale worked tirelessly alongside the generals, ensuring that the retreating Vorak could not regroup quickly. Each success reinforced his reputation, and the soldiers' admiration grew. They no longer whispered about him merely as a human envoy. They spoke of him as a strategist, a leader, and even as a figure of legend. Queen Saria summoned Kale and Lyra to the throne room. The chamber was filled with advisors and generals, all eager to witness the results of the battle and to hear the assessment of the human who had led them to victory. Kale bowed respectfully, while Lyra stood beside him, silent but proud. "Captain Kale Roran," the queen said, her voice steady, "you have exceeded all expectations. You have demonstrated wisdom, courage, and foresight beyond what we thought possible. Your presence has not only saved our people, but has transformed the way we approach warfare and leadership. You have earned the respect of our soldiers, our generals, and our people. You showed them what humans can achieve. They fought because they believed in you. And I have come to realize that my respect and admiration go far beyond what I imagined. I could not have done it alone. Your partnership with Princess Lyra represents not just alliance, but a new era of trust and collaboration. They had faced overwhelming odds together, relied on each other's strengths, and discovered that partnership could be as powerful as any strategy. In the following days, the palace was filled with celebration and quiet reflection. The soldiers honored Kale not as an outsider, but as one of their own. Stories of his strategies, his calm under pressure, and his ability to see the battlefield as a living map spread across the city and beyond. The legend of the human strategist, the god of war, was no longer a whisper. It was a truth recognized by all who had fought alongside him. Kale, for his part, remained humble. He continued to work with the generals, refining defenses and preparing for any future threats. He knew that victory in one battle did not guarantee peace, but he also knew that humanity had proven its value in a galaxy that often underestimated it. The combination of human ingenuity and Xylar discipline had achieved what seemed impossible. Princess Lyra spent time with him during the quiet moments, walking along the crystalline halls, discussing strategy and reflecting on the battle. Their conversations were no longer formal or constrained by duty. They shared insights, laughter, and mutual admiration. Slowly, the seeds of deeper connection took root, built on shared experience and respect rather than mere obligation. One evening, as they watched the twin suns set over the horizon, Lyra spoke softly. "Kale, you have changed more than the outcome of a battle. You have changed the hearts and minds of our people. You have changed me. I have learned as much from you as you have from me. Together, we are stronger." The stars above the Xylar capital glimmered as night fell, reflecting off the towers and streets, a reminder that the galaxy was vast and full of challenges. But in that moment, Kale and Lyra knew that they had faced the greatest challenge and emerged victorious. Humanity had proven its worth, not through sheer numbers or strength, but through ingenuity, courage, and the ability to rise above expectation. And as they stood together, side by side, they knew that the future, though uncertain, was theirs to shape, guided by wisdom, courage, and the bond forged in the fires of war. The legend of Captain Kale Roran, the human who became a strategist, a leader and a god of war, would endure for generations, inspiring those who came after to believe in what humanity could achieve among the stars. The palace, the city, and the people were safe. The Vorak were defeated, and the bond between human and Xylar had been strengthened beyond politics. What began as a duty had become destiny. And in that destiny, Kale and Lyra stood together, ready to face whatever the future held, side by side.